In today's video, I'll be revealing David Blaine's most dangerous and famous tricks of all time. From shoving a metal hanger down his throat to retrieve a ring, to chewing and swallowing nails, and even a wine glass, and so much more. And as a bonus, I'll also be exposing his most viral card tricks, all in this one video. Starting with David Blaine's dangerous glass-eating stunt. David casually picks up Arnold's wine glass and drinks the remaining wine inside it. Afterward, he casually takes a bite out of the glass and starts eating it, up to the point he even swallows the glass. He also performed this glass-eating trick recently on the Jimmy Kimmel Show with Ellen Pompeo. Some of you might suspect that the glass is simply fake, that it's candy glass, and that's why he's able to break it down with his teeth and cause no harm to himself. But the reality is quite different, and some of you might even find it unbelievable, but I will provide proper evidence to support my explanation. First of all, David Blaine isn't just a magician. He is also a well-known endurance artist. He's been buried alive for 7 days with no food, encased in a block of ice for 63 hours, stood atop a 100-foot pillar for 35 hours with no safety harness, and survived 44 days sealed in a plexiglass box suspended over the Thames River with only water. He's also held his breath underwater for over 17 minutes, spent a week submerged in a water-filled sphere, and endured over 1 million volts of electricity in his electrified stunt. Each act tested the edge of physical and mental limits, redefining what's humanly possible. Now, putting things into context, before I explain how exactly he's doing it and how dangerous it still is, even though he's actually eating the glass, I'm going to provide even more proof with Penn Jillette, who's a well-known magician from the duo Penn and Teller. It's not like glass eating is just candy glass being eaten. There are methods to it. Someone asked Penn Jillette on Twitter on The Wired show how magicians eat glass without injuring themselves. And here's what he said.
How do magicians eat glass without injuring themselves? That's not a magic trick. It's a geek trick. There are a few things that make it easier in terms of diet and preparation.
At no point am I saying that this trick is safe, but it's really being done. Here's another clip where David Blaine admitted having health issues from several of his stunts, including this glass-eating one.
And then I would guess that the unknowns from eating glass, kerosene, these things, probably there's a lot of residual effects that I don't really know about yet.
Now, I'm not done with the evidence yet. In fact, there is an entire 17-minute-long video uploaded by Scam School where Brian Brushwood himself eats a light bulb and even has one of his friends eat it too, but just a very small piece. Here's the science behind it. Glass is brittle. It doesn't bend or give way under pressure. Instead, it snaps cleanly and shatters into smaller, sharp pieces, but once it breaks down far enough, those pieces lose their ability to cut, which is the entire reason this stunt is even possible in the first place. But how is he able to chew and swallow glass without tearing his mouth apart or bleeding all over the place? It's actually a carefully controlled process. He doesn't just chomp down like a maniac and hope for the best. Instead, he uses his molars, the flatter teeth in the back of the mouth that are made for grinding, to slowly crush the glass into smaller and smaller fragments. Trying this with your front teeth would be a disaster because they're not built for that kind of force and would probably snap on contact. But molars can take the pressure, and when used slowly and precisely, they can reduce the glass to a texture that's no longer dangerous. It doesn't turn into sand exactly, but it gets close, just small enough that it stops acting like something that can slice into the soft tissue inside your mouth. Once it reaches that point, it becomes relatively safe to move around the mouth and eventually swallow. The biggest issue is what it does to your enamel, which is the protective outer layer of your teeth. Once enamel is worn down, it doesn't grow back, and without it your teeth become much more sensitive, vulnerable to decay, and basically just weaker overall. Blaine himself has admitted that he's done permanent damage to his teeth from repeating this stunt so many times over the years.
On the munching on glass, I mean,
It's probably not a good idea.
Well, I mean, you have issues today, right?
This is totally worn away. All the enamel's gone from the tooth. His nerve is almost exposed.
Then there's the digestion part. If the glass has been crushed properly and isn't coated in anything toxic like paint or chemicals, it can actually pass through the digestive system without causing serious internal injuries. The body doesn't try to break it down. It just treats it like any other indigestible material, and eventually it passes out the other end. But that's only if it's done right. One mistake, and it could easily rip through your insides. So no, the trick isn't fake, and there's no special glass or clever illusion. That last one was impressive, but this next one takes it to a whole new level, because now we're diving into David Blaine's impossible hanger ring linking illusion. David Blaine requested a ring from different groups of celebrities in various clips. He then swallows the ring, opens his mouth wide, and raises his tongue to show his spectators that he isn't hiding it in his mouth. Following that, he requests a wire hanger and tells a spectator to straighten it out, then dips it down his throat. Once the hanger is deep inside, the magician asks one of his spectators to pull it out of his throat. Amazingly, after a spectator pulls the hanger out of David's throat, the ring appears hooked onto the straightened hanger. David Blaine also performed this same trick on Jimmy Kimmel's show alongside Ellen Pompeo. I will also cover the method he used in that version. Well, how did he perform this trick? Let's figure this out together. Before we explain how David executed his trick, first we will debunk a popular theory. Most people believe that the ring the illusionist swallows wasn't hidden in his palm in the first place. They believe that since he cups his palm and brings it closer to his mouth, he could have possibly thrown the ring into his undershirt below his neck. According to this theory, David secretly took the ring out of his shirt when his spectators were looking for the hanger he requested, and the ring could have dropped from his shirt and down into his pants. Then, when the time comes to place it on the wire hanger, he inserts the ring into the hanger through a slit close to its hook. However, in reality, both of the aforementioned theories are wrong. In terms of making the ring disappear, from the first camera angle, David does make it appear like he throws the ring into his undershirt. The reason most viewers believe this theory is because David leans his body backward in one of the clips, and his neck area is covered. So we can't tell if the ring went into his mouth or into his undershirt. However, in another clip, his body doesn't lean backward when he closes his palms and blows air into them. Also, there is a significant gap between his closed palms and neck, so he couldn't throw the ring into his undershirt without being noticed. From our observation, his mouth made direct contact with his closed palms, and after that he opened his palms to show that the ring had disappeared. Hence, David's mouth is the only place the ring could have gone. According to the theory of several viewers, the hanger used for the trick is a gimmick, in the sense that it has a slit close to its hook, and the illusionist slid the ring through it. However, in reality we can see that the hanger was handed to a spectator and stretched by the spectator. So if there was any sort of cut on the hanger, the spectator would have spotted it, because the hanger would have disassembled. Also, we observed that there was no slit in the area close to the hanger's hook in the clip the magician made with Johnny Depp. Based on our observation, even though it seems there's a slit on the curled hanger due to the dark background and the lighting, there's no slit on it. Now we will explain how he actually performed this amazing illusion. Firstly, we noticed that the magician couldn't have tossed the ring into his shirt because we had a clear view of his undershirt. There was no gap between his body and undershirt, which means he couldn't have thrown the ring into his shirt. If he had done that, the ring would have bounced off his neck and dropped to the ground, blowing his trick. The most simple and logical explanation is that David did throw the ring into his mouth. Although he made it seem like he swallowed the ring, in reality he didn't swallow it. Instead, he performed this trick like most popular magicians would perform an object swallowing trick. The illusionist hid the ring at the base of his mouth, between the gum of his lower jaw and his lower cheek. Additionally, after he throws the ring into his mouth, we observe a slight bump on the lower part of his right cheek. The reason the bump appears is that he is pushing the ring with his tongue to the lower part of his jaw. In terms of the hangers, we noticed a questionable moment. The spectators are celebrities and are privileged to have quality hangers in their closets. Not only did all of them have cheap wire hangers, but they all had the exact same ones. As it turns out, David Blaine's assistants placed the wire hangers in the celebrities' wardrobes moments before the magician requested one, unlike everyday people. Celebrities wouldn't notice little things like wire hangers planted in their wardrobes. The wire hangers were planted in the celebrities' wardrobes for two reasons. Firstly, because the illusionist needed them to perform his hanger-swallowing trick. These hangers are stretchable, which makes it possible to use them for the trick. Secondly, while the hangers are not gimmicked, they are slightly manipulated. They are manipulated in the sense that the wire wrapped around the base of the hook is very slightly loosened. When the magician asked the spectators to fetch him a wire hanger, he removed the ring from the base of his mouth and palmed it in his hand. After receiving the hanger, he made it seem like he was stretching it, but in reality he was twisting the wire near the hook. Then he hooked the ring onto the hanger through the loosened end of the wire, just like a key would be hooked to a key ring. Once the ring was hooked onto the hanger, David twisted up the loosened wire and hid the ring in his palm while holding the end of the hanger. While the hooked ring was hidden in his hand, we notice an object concealed in his palm, which explains why his fingers were curled. After successfully hiding the ring, he put the hanger in his mouth and dipped it into his throat. Then he released the ring when his hand got close to his mouth and grabbed it with his lips. Also, we notice the illusionist covering his mouth with his hand to prevent spectators from noticing him holding the ring with his lips. Thereafter, he asks a spectator to pull out the hanger from his throat. While the hanger is being pulled, the illusionist holds the hooked ring between his lower lip and teeth, then lets it go just before the tip of the hanger is pulled out of his mouth. The second method David Blaine used involves simply switching the hanger behind the table with one that already has a ring attached to it. You can spot the moment right after Blaine eats the glass and hands it to Jimmy for examination. He steps out of frame towards the table and returns with a different hanger. You can tell it's a different one by comparing it to the original. The appearance and the bends in the wire are noticeably different. We're just heating up. The next one? Pure madness. David Blaine's dangerous mouth-stitching stunt. In this trick, David Blaine introduces a spool of thread, breaks off a piece of string connected to a needle, and completely sews his mouth shut. Afterward, he has the female actress select any playing card from inside the deck. He tears a piece of that playing card and hands it over to the host of the show. The remaining portion of the card is placed inside the deck, and after springing it into the air, David Blaine appears to have caught something inside his sealed mouth. The stitching is then cut with scissors to reveal a card inside his mouth, which is the remaining portion of the Jack of Spades. Upon confirming that it is the same card that David Blaine had in his mouth, it turns out to be the exact same one. Well, how did he perform this trick? Here is the secret. Let's begin by making some observations. We'll note key points and later explain how they contribute to the overall trick. When David Blaine takes the needle, already attached to the thread on the spool, he breaks the thread using his mouth. This might appear normal to the layperson, but will later reveal the significance of this step. During the card selection process with the female actress, Blaine ensures that the deck of cards he spreads out is done with a small spread. It's important to note this because he appears to be guiding her toward a specific card, rather than allowing her to make a free choice. Initially during the performance, David Blaine is talking and engaging with the audience. He maintains this conversation even when pulling the needle off the spool of thread. However, Something intriguing happens as soon as he breaks the thread with his mouth. He goes completely silent. This abrupt shift in behavior merits closer scrutiny. We noticed another suspicious detail during the performance. While David Blaine initially tears about half of a corner off a card and hands the remaining piece to Jimmy Fallon for further tearing, a closer examination reveals something unusual. It appears that there is a predefined crease in the card, as if the path for the tear had already been marked. Well, if you haven't figured it out by now, in the beginning, when David Blaine takes out the spool of thread with the needle attached and attempts to break the thread with his mouth, it's not just a simple act. This is a crucial misdirection moment. Blaine secretly loads a folded Jack of Spades card into his mouth during this process. The selected Jack of Spades is unique because it's missing its top left corner, and this missing piece becomes significant later in the performance. Before the performance, David Blaine meticulously prepares two specially designed gimmicks. He starts by taking a Jack of Spades card and tears off precisely half of it, specifically removing the top left corner. He then takes this first torn card and, using a cutter, traces a thin cut on the second Jack of Spades card around the top left corner. This thin cut is the predefined crease in the card, the path for the tear he makes when he tears the card in front of the spectators. The remaining section of the first card is then folded up twice and concealed inside the hollow center of the spool of thread, which conveniently has an empty section in its cylindrical design. To ensure that the female spectator selects the predetermined card, David Blaine employs a classic force method with utmost precision. He catches a pinky break in the deck, rapidly spreads the cards, and subtly guides her towards picking the desired card. This manipulation ensures that she selects the card he wants her to choose. It's worth noting that he appears to be quite forceful in having her touch the specific card he intends her to select. Returning to the moment when David Blaine sews his mouth shut, this part of the act is both genuine and highly dangerous. It adds an extra layer of mystique to the performance. He uses the needle and thread to seal his lips without any safety precautions or cleaning the needle. This audacious act adds an element of risk and intrigue, intensifying the overall effect of the performance. Pretty solid, but we're not done yet. The next section is David Blaine's dangerous nails-eating trick. In this trick, David Blaine requests Jimmy to dump out a box of nails into a glass bowl and requests him to put one nail in his mouth, which David Blaine chews up and swallows, showing his mouth empty. Then he decides to go all in by taking the bowl in one hand and stuffing his mouth with nails until it's entirely full, and completely swallows it and shows his mouth is completely empty and he genuinely swallowed them. So, what's the secret behind this trick? To really grasp what's going on in this part, focus carefully on the moment when he first tells Jimmy to put the nail in his mouth. As he starts to chew it, you'll notice his tongue pushing the nail forward, which makes the skin just outside his mouth bulge slightly. That little bulge is the key giveaway, because, as you might have figured out, the nail was secretly tucked near the bottom of his gum line. That clever placement is what allows him to open his mouth and show that it looks completely empty. But then there's the next part. How does he manage to eat so many nails without them visibly piling up inside his mouth? Hiding that many nails without any lumps showing along his jaw seems impossible, right? To figure that out, watch this clip, slowed down. While it looks like he's stuffing his mouth full of nails, he's actually doing something sneaky at the same time. He's subtly spitting some of them out as his hand moves back up. He keeps repeating this move, making it seem like every nail goes into his mouth, even though he's quietly getting rid of most of them. By the time we reach the end of the trick, there are still a few nails left in his mouth, probably around 3 or 4. And what happens to those nails becomes more obvious when you watch it frame by frame. You'll catch him sliding each nail along the bottom of his cheek, where you'll start to see tiny lumps form. In one of the close-up shots, if you look closely, you can even spot a small glint of a nail that didn't get hidden very well, which helps confirm exactly how the trick was done. That was cool, but what's next is on another level. Up next is David Blaine's frog regurgitation trick. David Blaine's frog swallowing and keeping them alive in his stomach trick is one of the most astonishing feats in modern magic, leaving audiences baffled. But what many don't realize is that this isn't just sleight of hand or illusion. Blaine is actually swallowing live frogs and regurgitating them. But how does his stomach acid not kill the frog? Or even more dangerously, couldn't the toxins from the frog kill him in the process? David Blaine's act draws inspiration from a long tradition of regurgitation performances. One notable historical figure was Mac Norton, known as the human aquarium in the early 20th century. Norton would swallow various live creatures like frogs and fish and regurgitate them, much to the amazement and horror of audiences. Houdini himself documented Norton's performances in Miracle Mongers and Their Methods in 1920, where he explained the techniques behind regurgitation, revealing that these feats were not supernatural, but rooted in physical skill and muscle control. In addition to Houdini's accounts, Memoirs of a Sword Swallower by Daniel Mannix delves into the intense physical training required for such acts. Performers like sword swallowers and regurgitators must learn to suppress their gag reflex, a skill Blaine had to develop in order to swallow live frogs. However, this isn't like a card trick where you can simply follow the steps. This stunt involves serious risks, even with written instructions. How did David Blaine manage to perfect this technique? Blaine actually worked with renowned sword swallower Ian Brown, who taught him how to regurgitate frogs safely. Ian is one of the few people in the world capable of performing this feat. But the question remains, how does the stomach acid not kill the frog? Frogs are sensitive to changes in pH. The normal pH of the human stomach is very acidic, around 1.5 to 3.5, which would typically damage the frog's skin, leading to its death fairly quickly. However, David Blaine dilutes the stomach acid by drinking large amounts of water before swallowing the frogs, effectively raising the stomach's pH to create a less hostile environment.
Yeah, I could put up to a gallon of water in my stomach, and then I can keep that in the stomach for enough time at the right temperature that the frogs are very comfortable, and I create an aquarium in my stomach.
But even if the frog survives, how is David immune to its toxins? Many frog species produce toxins as a defense mechanism, which can be harmful or even fatal if ingested. While perfecting this trick, Blaine encountered a significant health challenge.
Some of them have salmonella, so I got really sick the first time. Then I didn't try it for a couple of weeks, and I did it again.
This experience forced him to become more cautious, selecting frogs that were both non-toxic and less likely to carry harmful bacteria.
Finding the best frogs that are the least toxic, that are the most durable, which ended up being northern leopard frogs.
Ian taught Blaine how to swallow the frogs by drinking a large amount of water mixed with bicarbonate, which creates a neutral environment in his stomach. Only watching him do this would make most people gag. So how does he control his gag reflex? To regurgitate frogs on command involves precise control over his esophageal muscles and diaphragm without harming them. Blaine trained himself to suppress this reflex through repeated practice, starting with small objects like potatoes and gradually progressing to larger items, similar to how sword swallowers practice overcoming the gag reflex and conditioning their esophageal muscles to allow for the insertion of swords without injury.
I think they took their secrets to the grave specifically because they didn't want other people to do it, because they didn't want other people to harm themselves.
Hold on, because what's coming next will blow your mind. David Blaine's terrifying knife-in-nose trick. In this trick, David Blaine takes a knife, pulls the tip of his nose slightly up, and shoves the knife straight into his face without any signs of pain nor bleeding. After which he has Keanu Reeves pull it out of his face, where we find no signs of blood yet again. So what's the secret behind this trick? Is the knife fake, or did he really just do what we saw him do? Well, what you're seeing is real, but it's not what you think you're seeing. David Blaine is actually exploiting human anatomy. Deep inside your nose, there's a straight passage that leads to your throat. It's called the nasal cavity. And while it's super uncomfortable to mess with, it's possible, with the right kind of training, to slide a long object, like a knife or a nail, back there without causing any real damage. Now, before you go jamming forks into your nose, there's a huge catch. This is something David Blaine trained for over years. The trick relies on going exactly the right angle. Too shallow, and it won't go in. Too steep, and you'll cause serious injury. Blaine basically learned to override his natural gag reflex and pain response to do this on cue, which is nuts. And the no bleeding part? That's just anatomy again. If you go in the right way, you're not hitting anything that bleeds. No capillaries, no veins, just a clean path straight through the nasal passage. So, no, it's not fake, it's just gross, real, and ridiculously dangerous if you don't know what you're doing. If you thought that was impressive, just wait, because up next we have David Blaine's invisible touch trick with Jamie Foxx. David Blaine's invisible touch trick with celebrities is considered one of his most viral tricks. He begins by asking Jamie Foxx's daughter, Corinne, to close her eyes, and then taps Jamie's left shoulder. When she opens her eyes and describes what she felt, she says she felt David push her left shoulder. He then repeats the trick, but this time Jamie closes his eyes while Corinne keeps hers open. After waving his hand over both of their faces, David takes a playing card and scrapes it on Corinne's nose. And it turns out Jamie felt the exact same thing. Well, how did he do it? Here is the explanation. He performed the invisible touch routine, which is based on the concept of dual reality and mentalism. You may have come across reveal videos of this performance, but none of them describe the actual method in detail with all the nuances. So you can actually go out and perform this with your friends, which is why I'm covering it in this video. Starting with the first phase, where Corinne, Jamie Foxx's daughter, felt the touch on her left shoulder. When you watch the video of this performance, published on David Blaine's channel, it starts with David Blaine asking her to close her eyes.
Close your eyes. Pay attention to everything.
However, her eyes can already be seen closed before he even makes the statement.
Close your eyes. Pay attention to everything.
This indicates something happened off camera that David Blaine hid from us in order to make it hard to reverse engineer. But with a few hints I'll give, you'll be able to figure it out. The first thing you'll notice is that Corinne's left shoulder is close to David Blaine, which makes sense as to why he pushed Jamie's left shoulder as well, since he can secretly tap on her left shoulder. This is hidden from the viewer standing beside the cameraman, filming from the spectator's point of view. The spectators, along with the cameraman, are located at around a 9100-degree angle, leaving her left shoulder easily hidden from their view. But from Jamie's perspective, he has his eyes open, so tapping her while Jamie is standing right in front of her would immediately be seen. To counter this, David Blaine used a very clever technique. Before the footage started filming, David Blaine stood right in front of Corinne, blocking Jamie's view of her left shoulder. Then he waved his left and right hands around her face, as if ensuring her eyes were closed, and secretly, with his right-hand fingers, tapped her left shoulder while everyone was misdirected into watching and ensuring her eyes were closed. This explains why her eyes were already closed before the filming even started, even before David Blaine asked her to. This was the perfect setup for the previous segment of the performance to be cut out, making the illusion hard to figure out. Now, there is one very important thing you must do before you even start the invisible touch routine, which is to have the spectator that will feel the invisible touch mentally prepared to remember whatever they feel. You don't just start off the performance by secretly tapping them and then tap the second volunteer, because there is a high chance that the subject will feel the touch but completely ignore it, thinking it was accidental. So you have to mentally prepare them for what's about to happen. First, have them close their eyes and then touch them in different places. While touching them, ask them to remember this sensation without saying anything. Clearly touch them in front of everyone in different places around their body, except for the place you're actually going to do the invisible touch. In this case, David Blaine touches different locations on her face, even her arm, except for her left shoulder. Then, at the very last second, he waves his hand over her eyes, pretending to check if they are properly closed, does the secret tap on the left shoulder, and goes straight to Jamie. The time delay is crucial here. Once you've touched them, they will remember the sensation, but they won't recall or mention it until you ask if they felt something. Even if the touch occurred 15 to 20 seconds earlier, they will still say they felt it because you instructed them to remember any sensations or feelings. It's essential to distance yourself from the spectator after the tap. According to the concept of dual reality, Corinne felt the tap a few seconds ago secretly without us knowing. Meanwhile, Jamie and the viewers believe Jamie was tapped on his left shoulder first. When it's time to ask the subject supposed to feel the invisible touch what they felt, the key is asking the right question. This can be done by having them reply to a yes or no question, or by having them describe exactly what they felt, as David Blaine does.
Tell us exactly what you felt. Tell us.
You, pushed me on the shoulder.
When you have them answer with a yes or no, the question of when they felt the touch is never addressed, similar to what Lior Suchard did in his performance.
You're gonna feel a little strange touch, Natasha. Like a little, did you feel it? Yeah?
Yes.
This is then followed by another specific answer that does not allow the volunteer to describe when they felt it. In David Blaine's case, when he asked to describe exactly what she felt, the command clearly stated that only the feeling was to be described. An incorrect question to ask would be an open-ended one that allows the subject to continue talking and end up mentioning when they were touched. Another important detail is not to say what you are doing with the subject who has their eyes open. If David Blaine were to announce out loud, "Jamie, I'm going to tap you on your left shoulder," while Corinne had her eyes closed, she would know that she felt the touch before Jamie was tapped on his shoulder. Silence, plus having her eyes closed, makes her have a different understanding of what's going on, while everyone else understands what's happening visually. As soon as the subject describes what they felt, the immediate reaction from the spectators stops her from over-explaining.
You, pushed me on the shoulder.
Remaining silent while allowing everyone to build the story of what happened makes the effect look bigger than it actually was. In the second phase, where Jamie Foxx had his eyes closed, you can see the invisible touch technique just by watching David's hands at this moment. Although it appears that he never touched Jamie's face, David Blaine actually had an invisible elastic thread looped on his right hand, into which he inserted his left thumb, stretching it out, so that Jamie felt the thread scraping his nose. This is followed by the yes or no question.
Did you feel anything?
Yeah.
What did you feel?
You talk now.
At this point, everyone expects Jamie to be secretly touched beforehand. This explains why David Blaine had to change the method. The mystery of not knowing what will happen helps you get away with the secret tap in the first phase. That was cool, but what's next is on another level. Up next is David Blaine's incredible coincidence card trick on Jimmy Fallon's show. David asks Jimmy to open a box of cards, turn the faces downward, and hold the deck in his left hand. At the same time, he provides every audience member with their own deck and instructs them to follow along with Jimmy. Each person is told to cut any number of cards from the top of their deck and reveal the face of the top card from their cut pile. These cards appear random, proving the decks aren't identical. Blaine then instructs everyone to keep their cut packet face up in their palms and place it beneath the rest of the deck. From there, they are told to remove the top 5 face-down cards from the deck, hold on to them, and discard everything else. Jimmy is then asked to choose a random person from the audience. Once selected, that person is instructed to pick a number between 1 and 5. The number chosen is 4. David tells everyone to take their 4th card and hide it in their pocket, then drop the remaining 4 cards onto the floor. Now everyone is left with only the 4th card they selected. To finish the routine, Blaine performs a separate illusion where a needle vanishes into Jimmy's palm and reappears with a card stuck to his hand. When Jimmy reveals the card, it's the 5 of hearts. Miraculously, every single person in the audience pulls out their 4th card, and it also turns out to be the 5 of hearts. So how did David pull it off? The secret lies in a clever setup done before the show. Inside each deck, 5 cards were turned face up. Then the 5 of hearts was positioned as the 2nd card in the sequence. These cards were placed face up on top of the rest of the deck. Then the 3 double backers were placed on top of the 5 face-up cards to cover them up and make the entire deck look like it's face down. Once the cards are squared up, they become 2 packets. The top packet has 3 double backers. The second layer has 5 forced cards. However, the rest of this base layer deck is not in any sequence. That explains the randomness of their cards when David tells them to split their cards and show the faces of the cards they cut to. During the trick, the magician tells them to cut the deck and flip it over. After following these instructions, the spectators were then asked to spread through the flipped-over's packet, making sure to ignore the top face-up cards, until they reach the first 5 face-down cards. At this moment, you can clearly see that the first 5 playing cards the spectator sees are going to be the same 5 cards that were placed face-up during the setup. In reality, every one of the audience members ends up getting these same 5 cards forced onto them just because they were all following the same set of instructions for decks of cards that were all set up the same way. You may have also noticed that the 5 of hearts is the 4th card from the top, and right below these 5 cards are the 3 double backer cards. If the chosen spectator had chosen some other number, everyone would have still ended up with the same card. This is because, like we discussed earlier, all of them have the same cards, with the same sequence. David Blaine applied a little adhesive to the back of Jimmy's card while handing it to him, which is why the card sticks to his palm. In addition, when the magician supposedly makes a needle disappear on the host's desk, it doesn't disappear into thin air. The needle went flat right behind the card that was stuck to Jimmy's palm. When the illusionist takes the card off his palm, we notice a light glitter, which is because the needle is attached to the card. The needle didn't stab through his palm because he didn't exactly slap Jimmy's palm vertically on the needle. Instead, he pushed his hand back slightly. This caused the needle to bend at an angle when it touched his palm and got sandwiched between the card and his hand. That was just the beginning. The real shocker, it's up next. David Blaine's calculator prediction trick. David begins his trick by telling Vint Cerf to shuffle a deck of cards. After he shuffles it, he asks him to pick a poker hand from the deck, which means 5 cards. Thereafter, the illusionist asks another spectator to open the calculator app on his phone. Once the app is opened, David asks Jeff to type any 3-digit number and multiply it. Then he instructs the phone owner to type a 3-digit number and press the plus sign. Afterwards, he asks Vint Cerf to type a number and tells a female spectator to tap the equal icon. Eventually, the entire calculation equals a 6-digit number. Amazingly, the number sequence of the 5 cards he initially asked Vint to pick is the digits that make up the 6-digit number on the calculator, which was 492,510. Well, how did he perform his trick? Here is the explanation. First of all, the 5 cards the illusionist asks Vint to select were grouped, and the magician had them selected from the middle of the deck. As it turns out, David used a technique to make Vint choose only the 5 cards in the middle of the deck in a particular sequence. The magician did this so he could use the 5 cards for a purpose later in the performance. Also, he ensures that Vint does not mix up the cards as well, because if the cards are mixed up, the trick will be ruined. To ensure that Vint selects the 5 cards, David uses the classic force technique. This technique requires the illusionist to put the 5 cards he wants the spectator to pick on top of the deck in a special sequence. You may be wondering, didn't the spectator just mix the deck before handing it to David Blaine? How would David Blaine keep 5 cards in a sequence on top of the deck? Well, if you observe closely, you will notice a camera cut. During the camera cut, David Blaine simply palmed 5 cards out from his pocket and placed them on top of the deck. The 5 cards that the magician forces on Vint are the 4 of hearts. Underneath that are the 9 of clubs, 2 of hearts, 5 of spades, and the 10 of diamonds, respectively. After the magician places the 5 cards on the deck is cut. But to distinguish between the 2 portions and to track the 5 cards that were at the top of the deck, the magician uses a pinky break. After cleverly demarcating the deck, the illusionist spreads the deck partially, but quickly, and asks Vint to select a poker hand. The magician didn't spread the deck openly because the spectator was too close to him, and he didn't want to give him too much room and time to make a different selection. As soon as the billionaire moves his hands toward the deck, the magician jumps to the pinky break quickly. Then the illusionist moves his hand closer to Vint's hand to force his fingers on the 5 cards David wanted him to select. To ensure that the spectator picks only the 5 cards, the magician purposely pushes the 5 cards with his left thumb and holds on to the rest of the deck. At this moment, we notice that the spectator was attempting to grab the 6th card, but the illusionist didn't let go, to prevent the spectator from grabbing it as well. When the illusionist requested an iPhone for his calculator trick, he made it seem like he could use any iPhone. But in reality, that's not the case. After asking around the room, he pointed to the man beside him on purpose. Although the man he pointed to was an actual guest, there was a setup done on the man's phone off camera without him realizing. After opening the calculator app, we observed that the illusionist ensures the man doesn't do anything else on the phone before collecting it from him. Had the man clicked the Clear All button on the calculator screen, the magician's trick would have been blown. The truth about the calculator trick is that it doesn't matter which numbers were multiplied together. This is because the moment the equal button on the calculator app is clicked, the resulting solution will always be 492,510. That is due to the setup done on the phone, as mentioned earlier. The setup David did on the man's iPhone can only be done on iPhones, which explains why he specifically asked for an iPhone before pointing to the man. Firstly, to perform the setup, the illusionist typed the number 492,510 that he intended to force on the spectator. Then he pressed the plus symbol, followed by 0, and then the multiplication button. After that, he rotated the iPhone 90 degrees to switch the calculator to landscape mode, which reveals the option of using brackets. Then he flipped the phone back to portrait mode to complete the setup. At this moment, the setup was complete, so David Blaine closed the app, locked the phone, and handed it to its owner. Once the app was reopened, to ensure the data on the iPhone calculator wasn't cleared, the magician quickly collected the phone from the man. Now we can test this setup with 3 random numbers. The first is 232 multiplied by 274 and then added to 3,741, which reveals the force number 492,510 on the calculator. When in reality, if we do the calculation of these 3 numbers without the setup, we get a 5-digit number, 67,309. That last one was impressive, but this next one takes it to a whole new level, because now we're diving into David Blaine's impossible thought of cards with Jimmy Fallon. This particular card trick on Jimmy Fallon's show is one of David's most viral videos on his channel, with over 36 million views. In this trick, David Blaine takes a deck of cards and riffle shuffles it in his hands 3 times, ensuring the deck is properly mixed. He then has Jimmy take out a group of 5 cards, which are not to be seen by David. He asks Jimmy to think of one of those 5 cards, after which the cards are shuffled behind his back. David then asks Jimmy to focus only on his chosen card, as David calls out the other 4 cards one by one, placing them on the table as he names each one. In the end, Jimmy is holding on to his chosen card, which David also figures out instantly. So, does this mean Jimmy Fallon is in on the trick? Nope. In fact, this trick has a very clever method hidden within the technique of how the cards are handled. If the first thought that came to your mind was that David used a stacked deck, then you're on the right track. But that doesn't explain how David Blaine performed a riffle shuffle with a bridge using that same deck, not once, but twice, which obviously contradicts the whole point of using a stacked deck. David has performed this same trick with a group of college students as well. In that particular performance, he didn't even use his own deck, but instead used a borrowed one. So if David Blaine is using a stacked deck, then there is no way he can perform with a borrowed deck. Secondly, the specific stack he used was a mnemonic stack. But what's so unique about this particular stack? If you watch his performance closely, you'll notice that all the cards are sequenced from ace to king for each suit as he goes through the deck, which clearly means he borrowed a brand new pack. However, he appears to be rearranging the deck and doing several faro shuffles before he begins to perform. These shuffles are not random at all. In fact, they organize the new deck order into the mnemonic stack. For those who want to learn these shuffles, I have linked the tutorial for it below. In summary, the control consists of single card counts and faro shuffles. But didn't David riffle shuffle and lose the stack here? If you look closely at David Blaine's hands, you'll notice that although he appears to perform the riffle shuffle and interlocks the cards, right before he attempts the bridge, the packets are immediately split apart. Only one packet is bent with his right thumb to make it look like the cards are interlacing. What you saw was actually a false shuffle, known as Einstein's false shuffle. Here you can see a new deck order stack, a riffle shuffle, and a bridge being performed in clear view, completely deceiving our eyes. But upon flipping over the deck, the sequence of the cards remains exactly the same. The secret behind this technique is that the cards are riffled from one end, making it convincing for the viewer looking from the front. But from the exposed view, you can see a clear gap here, which is taken advantage of in order to uninterlace the 2 packets. After that, one of the packets is sprung to make it look like the cards are interlacing, as you would expect in a bridge right after a riffle. Knowing David performed a false shuffle makes everything a lot easier to follow. At this moment, when he asks Jimmy Fallon to take cards out of the spread, he does not allow him to take just any 5 cards. Instead, he gives specific instructions to take a group of cards.
Mm-hmm. Take like 5 cards, a little group, like a poker hand. Yeah. Good. Is that 5? Good. Don't let anybody see them, just you. Good.
By taking a group of cards and immediately cutting the deck, which you can clearly see David Blaine doing right here, by placing the top of the spread at the bottom, he only needs to take a peek at the very top and the very bottom card of the deck in his hand to know which 5 cards in sequence Jimmy has. In this case, you can clearly see that the bottom card David Blaine is holding in his left hand is the 7 of spades. According to the mnemonic stack, the 5 cards that come after the 7 of spades are the 10 of hearts, the ace of diamonds, the 4 of spades, the 7 of hearts, and the 4 of diamonds. If you fast forward to when Jimmy reveals all 5 cards, these were the exact ones he was holding the entire time. It was right here when David peeked at the top and bottom cards of his deck, using the excuse of asking Jimmy to do the same. But you may still have one question in mind. Although David Blaine knew which 5 cards Jimmy Fallon was holding, this doesn't explain how he knew exactly which particular card Jimmy had selected out of the 5 and was merely thinking of. The method behind this is extremely clever.
Think of your card specifically and do this now. Put it behind your back. Put it behind your back. No, the whole group behind your back.
Notice David Blaine's instruction to put it behind your back. This instruction intentionally makes the spectator think they have to put their thought of card behind their back. As soon as they reach to pull their card out halfway, it gives away the position of which card they had selected in their mind by giving a physical tell. Due to the clever wordplay by David Blaine, this instruction is then followed by an immediate correction.
Think of all of them, but think of your card specifically and do this now. Put it behind your back. Put it behind your back. No, the whole group behind your back. And mix it up.
This covers up the apparent miscommunication by having them place all the cards behind their back and shuffle the sequence. At this point, it doesn't matter whether they shuffle the cards behind their back, because the initial 5 cards they had in their hand were not allowed to be shuffled earlier. But in his performance on The Tonight Show, we find something fishy.
Good.
Oh my God,
And
don't freak me
Jimmy,
out, man.
Jimmy, put the cards behind your back.
You'll notice this moment where David Blaine moves away from Jimmy. He appears to say something, but then we see an immediate camera cut. This jump cut was done by the producers of The Tonight Show to hide the clever method David Blaine used to figure out which card Jimmy was thinking of. The performance with the students was uncut. We clearly saw his sneaky method. We've only scratched the surface. Let's dive deeper with David Blaine's teleporting card trick on Jimmy Fallon's show. David Blaine began by dealing cards face up and asking the volunteers to count a total of 10 cards. To verify, one volunteer recounted them one by one. Next, he had Jimmy call stop as he dribbled the deck, landing on the 3 of diamonds. Blaine emphasized that only the number mattered, and claimed he would teleport 3 cards from his deck into the volunteer's packet, which had been held against their chest the entire time. After riffling the deck 3 times, the volunteer felt something change. When they recounted, they now had 13 cards. The cards were gathered again and held against the chest. David Blaine then turned to the second volunteer and asked him to think of a number up to 10. He stated 3. Blaine then asked a third volunteer to think of a number up to 5. They chose 4. Adding, he stated he would now move 7 cards. This time, he sprung the deck toward the packet, and the volunteer felt it thicken. Upon recounting, the packet contained 20 cards. So how did Blaine teleport the cards right into their hands not once but twice? The secret behind this trick, one might assume, was a gimmicked deck, such that the cards were in pairs and attached with adhesive. But that's not the case here. In fact, it's just clever technique and wordplay to create the illusion of randomness. At the beginning, when he counts 10 cards onto the table, he purposely does so face up. These face-up cards will soon have 3 additional cards loaded underneath them. Notice what David Blaine says at this moment.
We don't care about the number in the suit. We only care about the actual paper that makes the card.
Although it may seem like an innocent remark, where he states that the material itself, as in the cards, is what matters, not the values or suits, he is actually counting 3 cards from the top of the deck and catches a pinky break like this under the guise of picking up the 10 cards from the table. He secretly loads the 3 extra cards underneath the packet before putting the deck back onto the table. David could have just picked up all 10 cards with his right hand, but the clever technique of sliding them off the table made it necessary to involve his left hand. Now, with 10 cards face up and 3 cards face down loaded at the bottom, this clever counting technique hides the extra 3 cards as he goes through all 10 and stops at the face-down cards. With these 3 extra cards now placed against the volunteer's chest, we know logically that David has to force the number 3 onto Jimmy Fallon. He initially shows Jimmy that all the cards are different and dribbles them. Most of my viewers are familiar with basic card force techniques, including the dribble force, where a break is maintained, ensuring that wherever the volunteer stops, the magician drops the remaining cards below the break, forcing the selection. But this contradicts what we see David Blaine doing. The contradiction arises because David is holding the deck by its diagonal corners with no visible break. He does use the dribble force concept, but with a slightly different technique. In this case, he used a short card. The short card was the 3 of diamonds. A short card is a card that is trimmed slightly along the length or width, depending on its usage. In this case, it was trimmed along the width. As a result, when dribbling through the cards, a short card acts as a break, but one that's practically invisible from any angle. So now that we know how he performed the first trick, what about the second trick? He doesn't use the same tricky counting method with the packet in the volunteer's hand. In fact, we can clearly see that the volunteer placed the cards on the table and scooped them up himself. So what's going on here? Let's rewind to the moment he demonstrates to the volunteer how to count the cards onto the table. Notice that David himself is counting the cards, and he counts a total of 7 cards during this demonstration. He does this to catch a pinky break right underneath them, like this. After that, he palms the 7-card packet in his right hand, and you can catch a glimpse of the palmed cards in this close-up shot of his right hand. While everyone is focused on counting the 13-card packet, David waits for the perfect moment. That moment is when they count to 10. As soon as the 10th card is placed on the table, he slaps the 7-card packet straight onto the mess in plain sight. After the cards are gathered up by the volunteer, everything is set up. Now David has to force the number 7 onto the volunteer. This is where clever wordplay is used. Since we know that only 7 cards were added, the only number he could really force was 7. In this case, it's a combination of both multiple outs and forcing achieved through clever wording. Listen to his first statement.
Can you name a number up to 10?
His wording to the second volunteer may sound innocent, but it's actually a psychological suggestion designed to push them toward picking a higher number. A survey of over 8,000 students, based on a Reddit data study on random number selection, found that when asked to pick a number between 1 and 10, the most commonly chosen number was 7, followed by 3. In the case of David Blaine, he knew that 7 and 3 were the most commonly selected numbers. To make sure 7 was chosen, instead of saying, pick a number between 1 and 10, which offers a broad range, he subtly reworded it as up to 10, encouraging participants to pick a higher number. However, since the volunteer chose 3, which is also a common selection, it wasn't the number David was aiming for. This is why he involves the third volunteer in a little addition game, and states this,
And can you name a number up to 5?
Instead of asking them to pick a number up to 10, he limits it to 5, again encouraging a higher number. The third volunteer then picks 4, bringing the total to 7. But what if the third volunteer had picked any other number? David Blaine has 2 ways to handle it. If they pick 3, he simply says, pick a different number, since the first person already picked 3. If they picked 1, 2, or 5, David would change the situation entirely. He would turn to Jimmy and say, Hey Jimmy, now you pick a number up to 10. Jimmy obviously can't pick 3, so the most common choice left is 7. Then David would ask, do you want to go with your decision or theirs? Most of the time, the final volunteer will prefer to stick with their decision. This number selection trick relies entirely on wordplay and common selections. There's no single direct method. It's all about having multiple outs. And David Blaine, being an experienced magician, knows exactly how to get out of tricky situations. Here's more evidence for your satisfaction.
Everybody has favorite numbers up to 10. They're always different. Say your favorite number up to 10. Say a number up to 10. Say your favorite number up to 10.
8.
Say your favorite number up to 10.
Watch this performance where he wants to force the number 7. Since the first and second volunteers didn't pick small numbers that added up to 7, it was the third volunteer that finally selected number 7. Here's how he handled the situation to filter out the selection.
But not on me. So
Okay.
say stop.
Stop.
On him or you? Was it him?
On Mark.
A timing force at the end, which was fairly obvious. In that case, the volunteer didn't go along with the plan, so David immediately switched to a backup. Behind this mask, only the truth remains, till we meet again.